Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. In an episode a long time ago, I was talking with Victor, and we were talking about the ideal society. And in it, I asked him the question. I said, in your ideal society, are there any Jewish people, either religious or ethnic? And he said no, and I asked him why, and he couldn't really answer the question. So I've developed a theory to answer that question. And also, I want to answer the question of Dave Smith. So Dave Smith's a Jewish guy. He's a libertarian. He's a decent man. I'm pretty sure he's a good father from the looks of things. And he gives really honest political analysis on his show, Part of the Problem, on YouTube if you want to check it out. But I want to, how does that happen? If we got all these people over here acting terribly, a huge percentage of them, and then you got a few handful of Jewish people who are good people, basically I developed a theory on that, okay? So the first part's pretty easy. On the majority of people of Jewish faith, the problem is Judaism. I mean, it's pretty simple. You've got, we've covered this stuff. Like, you got the oven of Achnai, the rabbis are more powerful than God. You've got Kol Nidre, where they can, it's the ceremony I got an episode about it, I'll link it below, on the eve of Yom Kippur, their holiest day of the year. They go take an oath. We even read the oath in the episode, where they absolve themselves of lying in future oaths for the next year. Like, you can't have these people living among you because you can't even take them to court. You can't even trust what they say in court. So anyways, but there's a lot of Jews who are not religious, and they still do terrible things. They're still bankers and doing all the terrible things. And so my explanation for why I think that is the case is because, so like, if my sons were to go play with other kids, and they were playing with a bunch of Christian kids, and then my son got in a fight, and they said, hey, that's not cool. The Christian kids said this. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, right? And now imagine my kids was going to play with a bunch of Muslim kids, and he got in a fight, and they were like, rad, dude, that was a good fight because Muhammad went and, attacked everybody from here to Mecca, or just whatever they say. I don't know what they would say. But they're getting influence from the religion if they're in the community. And so we know one thing about Jewish people is that they congregate together very well, which is good because that helped them make it through the diaspora and still have their culture, whatever that is, to get intact to some degree. And any other people that wouldn't have happened with. But it was because of the closeness of their communities is one of the reasons that they were able to do that. But that also causes, if you were Jewish and you were raising Jewish children, not in the faith of Judaism, but just around other kids who had the faith of Judaism, they're going to get those terrible values from Judaism. There's a documentary, and I think it's called Israelism, and in it they were talking about how they just the Jewish kids go to these events and they just pump them with Israelism. What's your favorite country in the world? These are like American kids, they're yelling, Israel, where do you want to go more than anywhere in the world? Israel, they're pumping these kids up. I couldn't even make it to the documentary. It was disgusting because, it's just kick them out of the country. Anybody running these programs, people sending their kids to these programs, you welcome to go live there. But you got to have a little bit of loyalty, I feel like, to live in the United States. You should. Well, I'm against the government, but I still love my country. It's a difficult thing there. But anyways, fundamentally what I'm trying to say is you're not working on behalf of another country, because that would be you being worse than the establishment that you oppose for doing the terrible things in foreign policy that they do. So basically, my reason why the Jewish people who are not of the Jewish faith turn out to be terrible like the people of the Jewish faith is because of the closeness of this community and because they're getting all these values. And I want to say here, from the Jewish perspective, they're not doing anything wrong. Because if you look at it like, say there's two Jews, and one Jew's a goy, somebody who's not Jewish, and then they look at each other and they're like, we're so far superior to them that it's fine that we just did that. We just, killed his dog, or just whatever terrible Jew thing you did. Now, from their perspective, they're just being Jewish. Like, it's just normal. It's like the slaughtering of the Gazans. They're just not. You've got a superior group that's killing. Do you remember the principle in Judaism that says that the difference between a Jew and a goy is farther apart than the distance between a goy and a dog? So if you look down on a dog as being beneath you, they look down on you as being lower than you look down on that dog. And so from their perspective, they're not doing anything bad. But from everybody else in the world, every single other group in the world, the Buddhists, the Islam, Christians, atheists, everybody else looks at them and they're like, oh, they're just the worst, you know? And so I just want to point out that from their perspective, we'll get people in the YouTube comments, Jewish people, and just saying like, hey, what's wrong with that? Or something like that, like the spitting on Christians episode or some of the Gaza stuff. And I know they're trolling on the Gaza stuff, but you know, they're terrible. Anyways, so now I want to talk about how I explained it to Dave Smith. Let me put a couple more people in that category with Dave Smith. Now, when I'm talking about these being good people, I'm talking about in what they do. So Dave Smith would be political analysis. Does he stick to his views? For one of his views, anti-war. He was against the Iraq war, Afghanistan war, against the Ukraine war, against supplying Gaza. Like he's consistently anti-war. It doesn't matter if you agree with his views. Does he have integrity? And he does. So let me talk about another one. I'm talking about Glenn Greenwald. Now, I know what you're going to say because he's a gay man who's married and has adopted 2 sons, right? I'm not saying he's a good man in his private life. What I'm saying is he's a journalist who does First Amendment work. And when they try to deny the rights of Trump during the Biden presidency, he spoke out against them, not because he's a fan of Trump, because he's a fan of the rights, because he's a fan of the Constitution. And then when Trump gets into power and turns that and starts taking away the rights of just whoever, citizens, illegal immigrants, whatever, he talks about that too. So he goes into the group of good Jews, in my opinion, but not for his personal life. Another 2 that I hesitate to put in here is like Keaton Weiss and Russell Dobular, who do a show called Jew Dissidents, and they're communists. I discuss some of their communist beliefs and even put them on a thumbnail on an older episode. And they've kind of gone off the rails since Trump got reelected because it's the Trump derangement syndrome, and then it makes everything they say angry, and then they start lying about points. But in the past, they've done some good work, I would say. And I'm not talking about their personal lives or anything, just in the work they do. So say I found 4 people. I really found 1, Dave Smith, because Glenn, that's personal stuff. And then these other guys are kind of, but this is what I got for you 4. Maybe you can think of some more. I cannot think of very many at all. And I'm really trying to honestly think of them. I was trying to think about one person I could give you as an exception to the rule that people of the Jewish faith are terrible. And I couldn't think of one. I asked Victor, he could not think of one. Maybe you could think of one. I don't know. But if that's the percentage we're talking about that you can't even think of one, that's pretty rough. And I think your best chance would be like, well, my neighbor. If you had a neighbor who was a really, really cool person. But in public life, it's almost impossible. So with Dave Smith and these other guys, they share one thing in common, I realized, right? And what they share in common is that they're all not of the Jewish faith, right? They're not raising their kids like of the Jewish faith or anything like that. Number 2, they reject Zionism. And number 3, they reject Israel, though that's kind of related to the Zionism thing. So I feel like it's safe to say that everybody who's Jewish, who has not rejected those 3 things, falls into one group, and they're terrible. But then, if you can reject those 3 things in our current 2025, because this could have been a different discussion if you were talking about this in the 1200s or whatever was going on there, you know? But in our day and age, if a person rejects those 3 things, then it's like, oh yeah, that dude could be my neighbor. Dave Smith can totally be my neighbor, right? But as a rule, the problem is if 99.9% of your people are in one way or another these terrible people, into all the usury and just the chewing people and just the terribleness, then you don't want them in your country. And that there's a Dave Smith one exception, because I wouldn't want the communists in my country either, just on political grounds, you know? And then you got the gay guy who adopted the boys, just in general, rescue the boys is my opinion on that, you know? But that's just my biased opinion. But So I got one example, Dave Smith, who I can have in my country. So the answer is Victor was correct in saying none of them in the country, because the reason stated in this episode. This is just a theory I have. I might end up developing it more. I don't know. I'm interested in hearing what you think. Do you think it sounds reasonable? Do you think it should be changed, or it's got a flaw in it? I'd be interested in hearing the comments. Okay, so Thursday I'm going to do another Holocaust episode. This time I'm going to cover the Dr. Mengele nonsense, and I'm going to tell you why I'm even bothering to cover that in that episode, and that'll be episode 18 of the Holocaust on Thursday. Hope to see you there.